So hello, everyone. I'm Syreeta Swann. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Association of American Publishers. And like all COOs, I wear a lot of hats, but today we're going to talk about StatShot. It's AAP's monthly and annual statistics report where we look at the revenue that publishers are reporting to us directly. So to begin, I guess I should tell you, AAP was founded in 1970. But AAP or its predecessors have been reporting on statistics since 1946. And at the time, in 1972, the first image, is when we did our first industry report that looked at different types of formats, different types of books, adult books, children's books, professional books, and actually tried at our best to estimate the size of the industry. In addition to that, well, as we've grown, we also do our StatShot annual now. That's our annual report that we produce every year. It's the estimated report as well, just like the industry statistics report. But with StatShot annual, it's a larger market. We have more publishers participating. In the first report, we had 154 publishers that participated and reported their revenue. Now for StatShot annual, we're at about 2,000, which is the majority of the publishers that report their annual revenue every 5 years to the US Census. And in addition to StatShot Annual, we do a monthly report called StatShot Monthly. With StatShot Monthly, it's just reported revenue. There's no estimating, there's no market analysis. It's just what is reported to us by publishers. So with the first report, the 1972 report, we did a deep dive into publishing as an industry, and we discovered all revenue came from print formats. Hasn't happened since 1970s, but all revenue came from print formats in 1972. That included, of course, adult books, juvenile books, religious books, Bibles. It also included professional and scholarly publishing, dictionaries and encyclopedias, which don't really exist anymore. But they were all published in print formats. And that's a big deal, I think, because like John, I'm a fan of the printed word. I prefer printed books. I think printed books stay with you, and I'm certain there are books around that are still from 1972, like the centuries-old book that John showed us. So moving forward to 1976 through 1986, that's when emerging formats started to become part of our reporting. That included audiovisual materials, mostly audiovisual materials for higher education, like college materials. But it showed that print was changing, well, publishing was changing. So you can see here that at that time, over 95% of all published materials were still printed. Now, spoiler alert, the percentage is going to keep going down, but it's still good. It's still good. It's going to keep going down because, of course, there are more emerging formats. So audiovisual, it was about 3%, 3.3% at the time. It never increased past this high of about 3.4%. And that tends to be kind of the track that emerging formats go. They come out, they're a big deal. Everybody wants to look at them and report on them. But print remains king even now in 2024, well, in 2025. So then, moving forward through the years, 1987 to 2004, you still see a predominance of print books. But of course, the predominance is decreasing a little. So we still have the same types of books. We're still reporting on adult books, juvenile books, religious books. But there are other formats, not just audiovisual, that are emerging. There's ebooks that are starting to emerge. There are audiobooks that are starting to emerge. And so, of course, that's going to dwindle down the amount of books that are published or purchased in print. But even now in 2024, print still dominates. So we'll keep going. It's not as bad news as people think. So now we're looking at 2005 to 2009. And you can see there that there are more there are more other formats that are growing, especially audiobooks and ebooks. They're becoming more competitive. But the good news still, over 90% of all publishing is still print. So that tells you that there's a lot of staying power in printed words. And even though there are a lot of reports about how audiobooks are taking over, how Audible is is the biggest thing in publishing, we're still keeping track with printed works, with printed materials, with printed books. Now in 2010, AAP partnered with the Book Industry Study Group to create a new type of report called Book Stats. And in Book Stats, they dug a little deeper into the different types of formats that are being published. And we start to see that digital formats, ebooks and audiobooks, they're now they grew to take over almost 20% of the industry in terms of what's being published and what's being sold. That statistic is going to remain pretty much the same going forward throughout the rest of this presentation, even this year. It doesn't really get any better than in the low 20s for our digital formats in terms of publishing. And we're getting more current now. In 2024 to 2018, you'll see the same thing. There's still a lot of interest in digital publishing, but it's not at that height of 20% previously. Publishing in print is decreasing, but that's because print books are mostly trait books in our reports. There's a whole nother level of print books that are in instructional materials. And you can see that's a large market as well. So if you're printing books, it doesn't have to just be trade to be successful. Instructional materials were very successful in the 2014 to 2018. Now, looking at trade specifically, because trade has the majority of our print formats, you'll still see that trade print books are still over 70% of the market. That's consistent even now. There aren't a lot of different types of media that have stayed profitable and interesting in terms of like printed books and in terms of publishing. But the physical book is the one that everybody maintains, they keep a hold of. And at 70% in 76% in 2018, the market is doing really well for printed books. Even though everyone has a computer, everyone has a smartphone, many people are listening to audiobooks as they drive home, they're still buying the printed book. Now, there hasn't been a lot of research done on that, but my theory is there are more people that are reading and writing learners than we think. There have been studies that prove that about 30% of people and learners in general are reading and writing learners, where they prefer to have a printed book in hand. And I think that has a lot to do with why digital formats, they're really great. People purchase them, they rent them, they stream them. But in the end, they still are buying the physical book. So now we're looking at 2019 to 2023. This is last year's StatShot annual report that was based on calendar year 2023. And we did a look back from 2019, 2020 to 21, and yes, 2022 to 21. Because in StatShot annual now we look at 5 years of data. And you can see just as an industry, print books are still performing pretty well. Although in 2023 it was down at 57%, it's still doing pretty well comparatively because digital formats, they still haven't exceeded the 20% back in the 1990s. And then when you look specifically at trade is still performing at 70% of printed materials. Compared to digital books and other formats, paper is still winning when it comes to trade. So there's a lot of, let me take a step back. As part of my administration of the statistics reports, we get a lot of requests from national media for data about audiobooks and about digital formats and how they're performing. No one ever requests how paper formats are performing, which I find kind of interesting. Because as you can see, paper formats have consistently continued to perform well across the market. Now, if we wanted to look at 2024, which is last year, AAP, we're still working on our statistics report for StatShot annual. We hope to have that out by before summer. But we do track StatShot monthly And we have, we completed a calendar year of StatShot monthly. So looking at 2024 to going back to 2014, we've looked at the trade market for, I see better without my glasses, We look at the trade market, and you can still see that in trade, printed books are still performing exceptionally well. You can also see that some of the emerging formats that came out prior, like physical audio, is dying. Digital is still a really big part of the industry. It's still an interesting part of the industry, but nothing is competing with printed books. So what I would like to let you know today is, for you all, there's a lot of concern about where the print market is going. There's a lot of concern about where book manufacturing is going. But based on the statistics that AAP collects, there's nowhere to go. Everyone needs you. So thank you for what you do. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have a question.
Yes.
So can you speak to the digital formats being a bit of a gateway to our physical book sales? Do you have any stats that will enforce that or disprove that with its connection that if somebody buys an audiobook, it may lead to a physical book sale? Any of your data support that?
Well, AAP's data only is on revenue, as reported by publishers. And then we also do a market analysis, but still on revenue and units. So we don't look into readership, but I can tell you anecdotally that everyone that I know, they listen to an audiobook and then they buy the printed book. So I think that's really great. That's a great gateway. For me specifically, I drive for my commute, so I listen to the audiobook and then I buy the printed book. So does that answer your question?
If you're the average American,
I'd like to think I'm average. So,
Do you buy the same printed book you're listening to, or do you go into more of that particular author's work?
I would buy the same printed book and the entire series behind it. But I'm a reading and writing learner. And I think if you're really considering who the market is for printed books, about 30% of the population, well, actually 33% of the population are reading and writing learners. So we want to have the book in our hands. We want to be able to actually read it. And then that way we retain the information better. So if you're interested in doing a study, that might be the direction to go. How people digest information, how people retain information. I think that has a lot to do with why books are still so popular, even though you can listen to an audiobook and exercise and listen to your audiobook and walk your dog. But in the end, people are still buying the printed book, because if not, how is it that printed books in trade are still over 70% of the market? Yes?
Does AAP break down that 70% of print and look at things like trim size, specs, and track that over time? Or do you guys not look at that data as an organization?
Well, we are not that detailed because we're looking at it from a publisher's perspective. So we do break down print by hardback, softback, mass market, and we even look at special bindings such as like children's books and board books, but we don't get as detailed as to like the manufacturing details of the book.
Oh. Does AAP still have, do they have lobbyists for Congress?
Of course. AAP.
All right, so does AAP still have lobbyists that speak for the publishing industry in the United States?
Yes, that is our entire role. The Association of American Publishers, we're the National Trade Association for the publishing industry. So what we do is lobby, and we lobby a lot. So about 2 weeks ago, we held an event called The Story Starts With Us. And it's basically about AI and how in order for AI to be successful, you need authors. And without authorship, there's nothing for AI to ingest in order to be intelligence. And so it was an all-day event. We had members of Congress there, former members of Congress, experts on AI, authors, musicians, anyone who writes. was there and invited to either represent their organization or just to speak on the written word and its importance. So yeah, we lobby a lot.
And just so folks know, I mean, we as BMI work as much as we can with AAP, but we're obviously, our focus is you all in the room. Mm-hmm. Their focus is the publishers. So a lot of what they'll work on is copyright, piracy. Obviously, AI is now big. Tariffs, obviously, because they're hitting the publishers hard. So sometimes we cross over, sometimes we don't, but we're all in this together to make sure that the published word is available for all. So
I've talked to writers who are really up in arms because the things that they've worked hard to create and copyright are suddenly being sourced by AI. Mm-hmm. How are we going to protect writers from their copyrighted work?
That's part of our lobbying efforts. Well, I'm not a lobbyist, I'm operations. But if you would like to know more about what AAP is doing in terms of AI, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, exchange information. I can put you in contact with my colleagues who actually work on AI. I don't want to tell any fibs while in school. But we agree that there is a problem with AI ingesting other authors' authorship. And authors are not being paid, publishers are not being paid, copyright is not being fully respected to the full extent of the copyright law. And just to give you some background as well, I worked for the United States Copyright Office for 15 years. So when it comes to copyright, I was in the Public Information Office. I've given lots of presentations on copyright. I've worked on the IT side of it. So I can talk to you about copyright all day if you like to do that. But AI, no.
Well, and on the statistical side, one of the reasons we wanted to have Syreeta here and give you guys a blanket overview of this program, because I get calls, I say average once a quarter. Might be from some of you in the room, might be from other folks. Somebody saying, "Oh, you're the book manufacturers. Tell me, what is the size of the North American book market?"
The size of the book market is about 30 billion.
So, but obviously from most of the folks in here perspective, it's about, when you say 30 billion, you're talking about revenue that a publisher gets from the retail sale of a book.
Yes.
Right. So a lot of times I think our folks might be saying, okay, well, how many units of books are sold in North America? And I know our friends over at Circana BookScan now, they track the retail environment. So that only captures a certain amount of books. That doesn't always capture a lot of what you guys are able to capture on the dollar side. And so it gets really difficult because you're trying to triangulate between dollars that StatShot collects, which is fantastic information, versus units, I think, that Circana reports in, and it doesn't always cross over. And then my all-time favorite thing that I always ask whoever it is that's calling me is, define a book. Does it have to have an ISBN number? If it's a spiral-bound recipe book that maybe one of Rebecca's congregations makes for their 1,000 people, maybe print 1,000 copies, but it's spiral-bound. Is that a book? It didn't have an I. So we can get into a lot of arguments, right, over the definition of a book and units and dollars, but all we can do is do the best with what we got, and I think we really appreciate you presenting all this information, because what they do is definitely a service to our industry as a whole, and is some of the best information that we have. And I know some of you have asked me, hey, how do I use this information? And so we really want to thank you for presenting that to us.
And I can also explain how you can use it, the information. We have a lot of subscribers that receive our StatShot monthly report, and also purchase the annual report, that are within the printing, book manufacturing industry. And they like to look at the revenue just to baseline it against their own business. So if you're ever interested in just having an idea of how the industry is performing, we always issue a press release on our website but we also accept subscribers too, and we'll send the reports to you.
Any other questions for Syreeta? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.